and you're living in fear every single day, you're living in anger and resentment and impatience every single day, then you're signaling the same gene in the same way, yes or no? And if you keep doing that for a period of time, sooner or later you're going to program that gene, and all of a sudden the body's going to get unhealthy, yes or no? And look, you know, people say, well, I did my meditation 3 days and nothing happened. But I tell them, how long did it take you to create that condition? Tell me. So then if meditation means to become familiar with, you got to become more familiar with the thoughts, behaviors, and emotions of your future than familiar with the thoughts and behaviors, emotions of your past. So then if you keep firing and wiring the same circuits in your brain, installing the circuits, the hardware becomes a software program, and it gets easier to think in unlimited ways. It gets easier to act like a wealthy person. It becomes easier then to cultivate the emotions of your future instead of the emotions of your past. People in this work, some of them have had horrific pasts. They've been abused, they've been traumatized, they have had very difficult conditions, and they stopped telling the story of their past. They started telling the story of their future, and they started believing more in that in their past. And when people come up to me and they vomit all over me about their past, I don't have a problem with that. I know that it's natural to do that. But I always ask them, if you can't overcome that past in some way and you're feeling those emotions, you'll only talk about your past when you're feeling those emotions, because those emotions bring you back to your past. But if you're having a great life, you never talk about your past anymore because you're no longer emotionally bound to it. And the moment you start feeling emotional, hint, you're back in your past. So now reason this with me. Great experiments have been done on the fact that we emit light and information, that you are an electromagnetic being, that you are emitting energy and information, and all that energy is carrying a message. And if you're living every single day in the same energy, then your life should not change in any way. When you are living in fear, when you're living in anger, when you're living in resentment, you're living in survival, because those emotions signal the stress response. When you turn on that stress response, you are going to draw from this invisible field of vital energy around your body, that light and that information, and you're going to turn it into chemistry, and you're going to diminish your very field around your body. So then, when you perceive a threat, when you see a circumstance in your environment that is unpredictable or unknown, the moment you perceive that, you activate that fight or flight nervous system, the sympathetic nervous system, and you're going to mobilize enormous amounts of energy to prepare yourself for that danger in your outer world. And you can do that on the short term because that's survival. But when the event is over, the body rests, parasympathetic nervous system turns back on, long-term building projects start to occur, you're starting to heal. And all organisms can tolerate short-term stress. But what if it's not a predator? What if it's your coworker? What if it's your boss? What if it's your sister-in-law? Because of some past experience, you're perceiving that condition in your environment based on your past, and you're turning on the same stress response as if you were being chased by a predator. You keep going back into that environmental condition, and you knee-jerk in the same way, and you keep producing those same chemicals over and over again, same chemicals over and over again. Stress chemicals downregulate genes to create disease. It's a fact. So then, if you're doing that for an extended period of time, and all of a sudden now you become addicted to the very rush of chemistry, it gives the brain and body a rush of energy, would you agree then, if you keep doing that over and over again like an addict, you need to feel angry, you need to feel lack, you need to feel unworthy, because it reaffirms the emotional state. It gets a little bit weird here because we got a big frontal lobe, and you can just call up a memory from the past. And the moment you call up the memory from the past, your body's in the past physiologically and emotionally. And you can begin to worry about the worst thing that could happen in your life. Out of the infinite potentials in the quantum field, you're going to select the worst case scenario. And you're going to begin to get ready for that event. And you are going to begin to change your emotional state in preparation for the worst thing that could happen. Because in survival, if you prepare for the worst, you have better chances of surviving. Now, I would call that a limited imagination. But in survival, though, when you're in stress, then, if you prepare for the worst and it doesn't happen and something less happens, you have a better chance of living. And this is the primitive survival gene that begins to become activated. And people spend their entire life doing this. And all they're doing is marrying a clear intention, a vision of their future, which is a very limited point of view, and embracing it with a familiar emotion of the past. And they're expecting their past to be their future. And if how you think and how you feel creates your state of being, that person's past is going to be their future. So then, reason this with me. If you can turn on the stress response just by thought alone, and the hormones of stress give the brain and body a rush of energy, and people become conditioned or addicted like junkies to those emotions, then would you agree with me then? If you can turn on that stress response just by thought alone, that you can become addicted to your own thoughts. And if the hormones of stress are highly addictive and you're using your boss or your coworker or your sister-in-law or your finances to reaffirm your addiction to that emotion, is it possible you become addicted to the life you don't even like? This is why change is so hard. And if you can turn on the stress response just by thought alone, and the hormones of stress downregulate genes to create disease, then your thoughts could make you sick. Okay, let's go out on a limb here. If your thoughts could make you sick, is it possible that your thoughts could make you well? So then that means then that you would have to start a process of no longer drawing from this invisible field of vital energy and turning it into chemistry and diminishing your own light field. When you do that over time in chronic stress, and you keep drawing from this invisible field of energy and turning it into chemistry, you have no light field. So now you're more matter and less energy, more particle and less wave. And in fact, the hormones of stress cause you to narrow your focus on objects and things and people, because that's where the danger is. And when the hormones of stress kick in and your brain waves go into high beta and you're aroused, you're going to pay attention to your outer world, and you're no longer going to want to believe in your inner world of possibility. The survival gene is switched on, and you won't want to go in, close your eyes and create, because it's not a time to create. It's not a time to focus on the unknown. It's a time to prepare yourself for what could be lurking behind those corners. And it's not a time to learn. It's not a time to open your heart. It's not a time to be vulnerable. It's not a time to sit still. It's a time to run, to fight, or to hide. And people spend the majority of their life living by these hormones. And those hormones cause us to become materialists, using our senses to define reality. And if you can't see it, you can't hear it, you can't smell it, you can't taste it, you can't feel it, it doesn't exist. And all of a sudden, people all of a sudden give up possibility. And now, when they're more matter than energy, they will try to force outcomes, control outcomes, predict outcomes, fight for outcomes, because they are matter trying to change matter. And as people begin to try to control and predict all the different things in their life when they're aroused by these chemicals, each person, each object, each thing, each place, each experience has a neurological network in their brain, because they've experienced them already. And as they shift their attention from one person to one problem or one thing, they start activating these different circuits over and over again. And all of a sudden, if you measure that in the brain gets highly incoherent. It's a house divided against itself. And when your brain is incoherent, you're incoherent. And when your brain isn't working right, you're not working right. And at the exact same time, when this vital energy is being drawn and turned into chemistry, the heart, the center of oneness, the center of wholeness, your first step to divinity right here, the bridge, your connection to the unified field, it loses its energy, and all of a sudden it starts to beat very incoherently. The emotions of resentment and impatience and hatred and violence cause the heart all of a sudden to no longer be in balance. And all of a sudden we no longer trust our heart. What we want to do is protect ourselves from everyone and everything in our life, and we no longer trust. And if you can't trust in the unknown, then it doesn't exist. And people understand when they're living by the hormones of stress unconsciously to run from the unknown. Because the unknown you can't predict, and it's being in that state of the unknown and not being able to predict your future that actually creates the stress response. So nobody takes a chance and possibility, and everybody's waiting for everybody to do it. And when you narrow your focus on matter and on objects and things and people, you're focusing on the particle in quantum physics, and you're eliminating the wave of possibility. And where you place your attention is where you place your